Sarah Thompson stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting her favorite yellow headband one last time. Her dark curly hair bounced as she practiced her brightest smile, the same one that always made her father, Marcus Thompson, say she lit up the whole world. Today was just another doctor's appointment, but Sarah always believed in looking her best, just like her dad taught her. Marcus Thompson wasn't always the billionaire tech genius that magazines love to write about. Just 15 years ago, he was coding in a tiny apartment, eating instant noodles, and dreaming big while raising baby Sarah all by himself. But his revolutionary app, SecureShare, changed everything. Now, at 42, he owned the most successful tech security company in the world, but he still said his greatest achievement was being Sarah's dad. That morning, their driver James pulled up in front of their modern glass and steel mansion in their sleek black SUV. Sarah hopped in, her white sneakers still spotless despite her morning play in the garden. Marcus followed, typing away on his phone. There was always some crisis at work that needed his attention, but never enough to make him miss Sarah's appointments. "Ready for your checkup, princess?" Marcus asked, finally putting his phone away. Sarah nodded, though her fingers nervously played with the friendship bracelet on her wrist. She didn't love doctor visits, but the lollipops at the end made up for it. The Westbrook Medical Center stood like a giant crystal palace, all sharp angles and gleaming windows. It was the most expensive private clinic in the city, where celebrities and business tycoons came for their medical care. The lobby sparkled with marble floors and modern art, and the air smelled like vanilla and clean linens. As they approached the receptionist's desk, heads turned. Everyone knew Marcus Thompson. He'd recently been on the cover of Time magazine, labeled as the man who secured Silicon Valley. But Marcus kept his usual warm smile, greeting everyone with the same kindness he showed to his office janitor. "Good morning. We're here to see Dr. Parker," Marcus said, his deep voice carrying its usual calm authority. "Sarah Thompson's 9-year checkup." The receptionist's eyes widened with recognition, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Of course, Mr. Thompson. Dr. Parker will be with you shortly." While they waited, Sarah told her dad about her latest science project. She was growing crystals in her home laboratory, a converted guest room Marcus had equipped with every safe science tool a 9-year-old could want. Marcus listened intently, asking questions that made Sarah beam with pride. They were so engrossed in their conversation that they almost missed the nurse calling Sarah's name. As they walked down the pristine hallway, Sarah's hand gripped her father's a little tighter. The walls were lined with impressive medical certificates and awards, but what caught Sarah's eye was a big poster about being brave during doctor visits. She squared her shoulders. She was Marcus Thompson's daughter, after all. Being brave was in her DNA. When they reached Dr. Parker's office, the atmosphere shifted subtly. The doctor, a tall man with graying temples and wire-rimmed glasses, looked up from his computer. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes as he took in Sarah and Marcus. Something in his posture changed, a stiffness entering his movements that hadn't been there seconds before. "Ah, the Thompsons," Dr. Parker said, his voice carrying a tone that Sarah couldn't quite understand, but made her father's eyebrows twitch slightly. "Let's get this examination started, shall we?" Little did any of them know that this routine checkup was about to become anything but routine, and the next few minutes would spark a chain of events that would change not just their lives, but the entire medical system itself. The examination room felt colder than usual as Dr. Parker snapped on his latex gloves with sharp, quick movements. Sarah sat on the paper-covered examination table, the crinkly sound under her making her even more nervous. Her legs dangled over the edge, her new shoes catching the bright overhead lights. "All right, young lady," Dr. Parker said, his voice carrying none of the warmth that Sarah was used to from her previous doctor. "Let's check those reflexes first." He picked up his reflex hammer, but instead of the gentle tap Sarah expected, he struck her knee with unnecessary force. Sarah jumped, not just from the reflex, but from pain. "Ouch," she said softly, looking toward her father for support, But Marcus had stepped out moments ago when his phone had buzzed with what his assistant had marked as an urgent security breach at one of his company's major clients. "Don't be dramatic," Dr. Parker muttered, scribbling something on his chart. His next movements were even rougher, pressing too hard on her stomach during the physical exam, being careless while checking her ears, and handling her arms like she was a rag doll rather than a child. Sarah, always taught by her father to speak up politely when something wasn't right, gathered her courage. "Excuse me, Dr. Parker," she said in her most grown-up voice. "Could you please be a little gentler? That hurts." The doctor's face changed then, a shadow passing over it that made Sarah wish she hadn't said anything. "Listen here, young lady," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "I've been practicing medicine longer than you've been alive. I don't need a child telling me how to do my job, especially not a—" He caught himself, but his meaning hung heavy in the air. When he grabbed her arm to take her blood pressure, it wasn't with any pretense of professional care. The blood pressure cuff was wrapped so tight it pinched her skin, and when Sarah tried to pull away instinctively, his grip tightened even more. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, but she remembered what her father always said: "Thompson women are strong, just like your mother was." She bit her lip, trying to be brave, but a few tears escaped anyway, rolling down her cheeks. The doctor's rough handling left angry red marks on her arm, standing out against her dark skin like accusations. Sarah had never felt so small, so helpless. In her 9 years of life, she'd faced mean kids at school and challenging situations, but never had an adult, especially one who was supposed to help people, treated her this way. Just then, the door opened. Marcus Thompson stood in the doorway, his tall frame casting a shadow into the room. His phone call had ended sooner than expected, a blessing in disguise. One look at his daughter's tear-stained face and the red marks on her arm, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Marcus Thompson was known in the business world for his incredible self-control. His employees often said they'd never seen him lose his temper, even during the worst crisis. But at that moment, seeing his little girl in pain, something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Dr. Parker must have sensed it too, because he took a step back, suddenly becoming very interested in his clipboard. But it was too late. The damage was done. And in the next 2 minutes, Dr. Parker would learn why crossing Marcus Thompson was the biggest mistake of his medical career. The examination room fell silent, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the kind of silence that comes before a storm, when the air is heavy with electricity and the world holds its breath, waiting for the first crack of thunder. Marcus Thompson's world stopped for a heartbeat as he processed the scene before him. His daughter's tears, the red marks on her arm, and the doctor's suddenly nervous demeanor. It all came together like pieces of a horrible puzzle. In his years of building his tech empire, Marcus had faced countless challenges, but nothing had ever made his blood boil quite like this. "Sarah, sweetheart," Marcus said, his voice eerily calm as he crossed the room in 3 long strides. He knelt beside the examination table, gently examining her arm. The red marks were darkening, promising bruises by morning. As a single father, he had kissed countless scraped knees and bandaged numerous paper cuts, but these marks were different. They were intentional. Without looking away from his daughter, Marcus pulled out his phone and pressed a single button. "Lisa, code red." He spoke into the phone. Lisa, his personal assistant of 8 years, knew exactly what that meant. Within seconds, his phone buzzed with incoming messages. His legal team was already being mobilized. Dr. Parker cleared his throat, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Mr. Thompson, I assure you this is all a misunderstanding. Some children can be quite sensitive during routine examinations." Marcus raised his hand, silencing the doctor mid-sentence. The gesture was subtle, but the power behind it was unmistakable. He pulled out his second phone, the one he used for secure communications, and began recording. "Sarah, princess, can you tell me exactly what happened?" Take your time. Sarah wiped her tears with her sleeve, her voice shaky but clear. He was really rough, Daddy. When I asked him to be gentler, he got angry. He grabbed my arm really hard, and her voice cracked. But she continued, showing the same strength her father was known for. As Sarah spoke, the clinic's administrator, Dr. Roberts, burst into the room, clearly alerted by Lisa. Her face paled as she took in the scene and the fury radiating from Marcus Thompson, their most prominent patient and biggest donor. "Mr. Thompson," she began, but Marcus was already in motion. He lifted Sarah gently from the examination table, letting her bury her face in his shoulder like she used to do when she was younger. "Dr. Roberts," Marcus's voice was controlled, but it carried the weight of incoming consequences. "I want every security camera footage from this floor preserved. Now." He turned to Dr. Parker, who had backed himself into a corner. "And you, don't leave town. My lawyers will be in touch within the hour." Marcus's phone buzzed again. His head of security had already pulled up Dr. Parker's complete history, including several buried complaints that had mysteriously disappeared from official records. His tech team had accessed sealed court documents revealing a pattern of similar incidents, all covered up through connections and quiet settlements. "Daddy," Sarah whispered in his ear as he carried her out, "am I still brave?" The question nearly broke his composure. "Braver than anyone I know, Princess," he answered, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like your mother." He kissed her forehead, remembering how his late wife had always fought for what was right. Now it was his turn to fight, not with anger or violence, but with every legal and ethical resource at his disposal. As they walked through the clinic's lobby, heads turned at the sight of the famous Marcus Thompson carrying his daughter, his face set in stone. His phone continued buzzing. His team was already in motion, pieces falling into place for what would become one of the most significant medical accountability cases in recent history. In the car, as Sarah finally began to calm down, Marcus made a silent promise. This wouldn't be about revenge. It would be about change. Real, lasting change that would ensure no other child would experience what Sarah did today. The next 2 minutes would set in motion events that would reshape medical practice standards across the country. The next 2 minutes in Marcus Thompson's car turned into a command center of justice. His fingers flew across his phone's screen while Sarah rested her head against his shoulder, her tears finally dried but her small hand still holding her sore arm. James, their driver, had already started heading toward the city's best pediatric hospital for a proper examination and documentation of Sarah's injuries. "Lisa, activate Protocol Shield." Marcus spoke into his phone. It was a contingency plan he created for emergencies, but he never thought he'd use it to protect his own daughter. Within seconds, his elite team of investigators, lawyers, and tech experts sprang into action like a well-oiled machine. On one screen, Marcus watched as his tech team accessed the clinic's records through completely legal channels. Being their security provider had its advantages. Dr. Parker's history began unfolding like a dark story. 3 buried complaints of rough handling, 2 settlements with minority families, all mysteriously erased from public records, but never truly gone from the digital world. "Daddy," Sarah said softly, looking up at the multiple screens her father was managing. "Are you going to make him lose his job?" Her voice carried no anger, only curiosity and concern, a kindness she'd inherited from her mother. Marcus paused, looking at his daughter with pride. Even after what happened, she was thinking about others. "No, Princess," he replied, "we're going to make sure he learns to be a better doctor, or find a different job where he can't hurt anyone else." His phone buzzed again. His head of research had uncovered something bigger. Dr. Parker was part of a network of medical professionals who had been protecting each other for years, hiding complaints and covering up incidents of discrimination. The discovery made Marcus's blood boil, but it also showed him that this was bigger than just one bad doctor. "Mr. Thompson," his legal head's voice came through the car's speakers, "we've already filed emergency complaints with the state medical board. But there's more. The clinic's insurance company has a history of quietly settling similar cases. This could be systemic. Marcus looked at Sarah, who was now watching a butterfly outside the car window, her natural curiosity already helping her bounce back. An idea began forming in his mind, one that would transform this terrible experience into something powerful. Change of plans, Marcus announced to his team. We're not just going after one doctor. We're going to rebuild the system. His fingers started typing out a new plan. A foundation that would track and prevent medical discrimination, support victims, and provide resources for healthcare providers to recognize and eliminate bias. Sarah perked up at her father's tone. She knew that voice. It was the same one he used when he first explained his big ideas that changed the tech world. Are you going to build something new, Daddy? Like when you made SecureShare? Marcus smiled, his first real smile since the incident. Something even better, Princess. We're going to help lots of people. He showed her a rough sketch on his tablet. A website where people could report similar incidents, get help, and find doctors who had taken special training in respectful care. The car pulled up to the pediatric hospital, where a team of trusted doctors was already waiting. But before they got out, Sarah grabbed her father's hand. Daddy, can we make sure other kids don't get hurt too? Maybe we can help doctors learn to be nicer. Marcus felt his heart swell with pride. His daughter, even after being hurt, was thinking about helping others. In that moment, he realized that the next phase of his response wouldn't be about revenge at all. It would be about transformation. That's exactly what we're going to do, Sarah, he said, already seeing the outline of a program that would revolutionize medical training. We're going to turn this bad thing into something good. As they walked into the hospital, Marcus's phones kept buzzing with updates from his team, but his focus was clear now. This wasn't just about one doctor or one incident anymore. It was about creating lasting change in a system that desperately needed it. Hours after the incident, Marcus Thompson's office on the top floor of the SecureShare Tower had turned into a war room. Screens covered every wall, displaying documents, surveillance footage, and an ever-growing web of connections. Sarah was safely resting in the adjacent room he'd designed for her, complete with books, toys, and a cozy beanbag where she was now reading her favorite science magazine. Sir, you need to see this, said Maria, his top investigator, pulling up a series of documents. We found 17 similar complaints against Dr. Parker in the last 3 years alone. All of them disappeared from official records within days of being filed. Marcus leaned forward in his chair, his tie loosened, and sleeves rolled up. The more they dug, the uglier the picture became. It wasn't just Dr. Parker. The entire Westbrook Medical Center had a history of discriminatory practices, carefully hidden behind their prestigious reputation. The clinic's board members, Maria continued, they're all connected to this insurance company, MedShield. She pulled up another document. Every time there's a complaint, MedShield steps in, offers a settlement, and makes it disappear. They'd been doing this for years. Sarah's voice came from the doorway, making both adults turn. Daddy, is this like in my detective books when the bad guys leave clues without knowing it? She had her stuffed elephant tucked under one arm, its trunk slightly crooked from years of love. Marcus smiled, amazed at his daughter's perception. Exactly like that, Princess. And just like in your books, the truth always comes out eventually. He turned back to the screens, an idea forming. Maria, what if we built a platform? Something that connects all these scattered complaints, something that can't be erased or buried. His fingers flew across his keyboard and a new window opened. The blueprint for what would become the Medical Justice Network. It would be a secure platform where patients could report incidents, connect with advocates, and track the status of their complaints. More importantly, it would use his company's advanced encryption to make sure these records couldn't be tampered with or disappeared. Just then, his phone buzzed with an urgent message. The clinic's board was trying to call an emergency meeting to discuss damage control. Marcus almost laughed. They still thought this was something they could control. "Sir," his legal head called in, "the state medical board just received our evidence. They're launching a full investigation. But there's more. 3 other families have already come forward after hearing about Sarah's incident." Sarah, who had been quietly listening, tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, remember when you told me that fixing big problems is like putting together a really big puzzle?" Marcus nodded, remembering their conversation about his work. "Well, maybe we need to help other kids find their puzzle pieces too." Her words hit Marcus like lightning. She was right. This wasn't just about exposing one doctor or one clinic. It was about creating a system where every piece of the puzzle could be found and put together. Change of plans, Marcus announced to his team. "We're not just going to file complaints or launch investigations. We're going to rebuild the entire system." He pulled up a new document and started typing out the framework for the Thompson Medical Justice Foundation. The foundation would do more than just track complaints. It would provide legal support to families who couldn't afford it, fund research into healthcare bias, and create training programs for medical professionals. But most importantly, it would give voice to those who had been silenced. As Marcus outlined his plans, Sarah curled up in her father's large office chair, hugging her elephant. "Is this like when you built SecureShare because people's secrets weren't safe?" she asked sleepily. "Yes, baby," Marcus replied, watching as his team began transforming his ideas into action. "But this time, we're not just protecting secrets. We're protecting people." The screens continued to fill with data, evidence, and plans, but Marcus's path was clear now. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about revolution. The next few weeks transformed Marcus Thompson from a tech billionaire into a healthcare revolutionary. His office had become the headquarters for what the media was calling the Thompson Medical Initiative. But while reporters camped outside SecureShare Tower, the real work was happening inside. Sarah sat in on many of the meetings, her arm now healed, but her determination stronger than ever. She'd started keeping a journal of ideas, just like her dad did, and some of her suggestions surprised even the experts. What if doctors had to spend a day as patients? She'd asked during one meeting, making the whole room stop and think. Breaking news. The TV announcer's voice filled the room. Dr. James Parker's medical license has been suspended pending investigation. Sources say evidence submitted by Marcus Thompson's legal team revealed decades of discriminatory practices. Marcus muted the TV, not interested in the publicity. He was more focused on the email he'd just received from another doctor at Westbrook Medical Center. "Listen to this, Sarah," he called to his daughter, who was drawing at her special desk near his. "Dr. Chen says 5 more doctors want to help with our training program. They say they've seen problems for years, but didn't know how to fix them." Sarah looked up from her drawing of a hospital where all the doctors had smile badges on their coats. "That's good, right? Like when my whole class helped clean up the playground, not just one person." Marcus smiled at his daughter's simple but profound wisdom. "Exactly right, princess." He turned to his team, who were scattered around the office with laptops and tablets. "How's the app coming along?" Maria, now heading the tech development team, pulled up a prototype on the main screen. "We're calling it MedGuard. Patients can rate their experiences, report incidents, and connect with advocates instantly." The app's interface was simple enough for a child to use, but powerful enough to track patterns across thousands of hospitals. "And look at this feature," Maria continued, showing an animation. "We added it based on Sarah's idea." The screen showed a virtual tour guide, a friendly cartoon doctor who explained patients' rights in simple terms. Sarah beamed with pride. Just then, Lisa rushed in with more news. "The medical board wants to work with us. They're proposing mandatory bias training for all licensed doctors, and they want our foundation to help develop the program." Marcus watched as his team celebrated this small but significant victory. But his attention was drawn to Sarah, who was quietly adding something to her drawing. "What are you adding, sweetheart?" "A learning room," she explained, pointing to a new section in her hospital drawing, "where doctors can practice being nice before they work with real people." Her words sparked another idea. Marcus quickly typed out notes for a simulation program, virtual reality training that would let medical professionals experience healthcare from the patient's perspective. It would be particularly focused on helping them understand the experiences of minorities and underserved communities. The foundation was already making waves. Hospitals across the country were reaching out, wanting to be part of the change. Medical schools were requesting partnerships for reformed training programs. Even insurance companies, seeing the shifting tide, were asking how they could help rather than hinder. Mr. Thompson, one of his lawyers, called out, "The Westbrook Medical Center Board is requesting a meeting. They're offering to make changes, big ones." Marcus shared a knowing look with Sarah. "Tell them we'll meet," he replied, "but only if they're ready for real change, not just damage control." As evening approached, Marcus and Sarah stood at the office windows, watching the sunset paint the city in golden hues. "Daddy," Sarah said, holding her father's hand, "I think we're helping make the world better, aren't we?" Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "We are, Princess. And do you know the best part?" Sarah looked up questioningly. "It all started because you were brave enough to speak up." The office behind them hummed with activity. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, people planning. But in that moment, father and daughter simply watched the sun set on one era of healthcare and rise on another. 1 year later, Sarah Thompson stood before a crowd of medical students, her bright yellow dress matching her confident smile. At 10 years old, she had become the youngest ever speaker at the National Healthcare Reform Conference, and her father, Marcus, watched proudly from the front row. "When I was 9, Sarah began, her voice clear and strong. "Something bad happened to me at a doctor's office. But my dad taught me that when bad things happen, we can either get mad or we can make things better. We chose to make things better." The audience, filled with doctors, medical students, and healthcare administrators, listened intently as this young girl shared her story. On the giant screen behind her, statistics showed the impact of the Thompson Medical Justice Foundation over the past year. Over 1,000 hospitals had adopted their training program, complaints of discriminatory treatment had dropped by 60%, and patient satisfaction scores were at an all-time high. Dr. Parker, who had lost his medical license, had actually become an unexpected ally. After months of counseling and reform programs, he now worked with the foundation, sharing his story as a warning and lesson to others. "I was part of the problem," he would tell medical students, "but Sarah Thompson showed me how to be part of the solution." Marcus's phone buzzed quietly. Another hospital had just signed up for their MedGuard app. The app had become as common in hospitals as stethoscopes, with over 10 million users rating and reviewing their medical experiences. But more importantly, it had created a safety net where no complaint could be buried or ignored. And guess what? Sarah continued, flipping to her next slide. "I decided I want to be a doctor too." The crowd erupted in applause. But a different kind of doctor. One who remembers that every patient is someone's child, someone's family, someone special. The Thompson Medical Justice Foundation had grown beyond anything Marcus had imagined. They'd created special programs for pediatric care, where doctors learned to explain procedures through games and stories. They'd developed virtual reality simulations that let medical professionals experience healthcare from different perspectives. Every medical school in the country now included their bias training program. After Sarah's speech, during the reception, a young medical student approached them with tears in her eyes. "I almost quit medical school last year," she told them. "I saw so many things that weren't right, and I felt helpless. But your foundation's changes made me stay. Now I know I can make a difference." Marcus watched as Sarah gave the student one of her special Future Hero pins, something she designed herself for people committed to making healthcare better. The pins had become a symbol of change in hospitals across the country. Later that evening, as they drove home, Sarah was looking through her journal, the same one she'd started during the incident. It was now full of ideas, drawings, and plans. "Daddy," she said. "Remember when you said we would make things better?" "I do, Princess." "Well, we did more than that. We made things right." She showed him her latest drawing. A hospital where every room had windows, every doctor wore a smile badge, and every patient had a voice. Marcus looked at his daughter, seeing so much of her mother in her strength and kindness. What had started as a moment of pain had grown into a movement of change. The Thompson name was no longer just associated with tech innovation. It had become synonymous with healthcare reform. As they pulled up to their home, Sarah spotted a group of medical students touring the new Thompson Medical Training Center next door, a state-of-the-art facility where doctors learn not just medical procedures, but empathy, respect, and understanding. "You know what's the best part, Daddy?" Sarah asked, watching the students. "What's that, Princess?" "Now when kids go to the doctor, they don't have to be scared. They just get to focus on getting better." She smiled, touching her own arm where the marks had long since faded, but the determination they'd sparked remained stronger than ever. And that, perhaps, was the greatest revenge of all. Not destruction, but transformation. Not punishment, but progress. The father and daughter who set out to right a wrong had ended up right a whole system, one caring heart at a time.